This episode is brought to you by Fallout 76, the post-nuclear RPG from Bethesda Game Studios. Explore the wasteland alone or with friends as you meet unique characters, complete exciting quests, and face dangerous foes. Take a stroll along the Atlantic City boardwalk in the latest update. Play Fallout 76 for free now through April 18th. Available on Xbox, PlayStation, and Steam. Visit Fallout.com to learn more. Rated M for mature.
We are back for another week of defense with our DC, Dan Carrel. And today we're going to be talking about having a system for pass rush lanes, third down, disguise, and of course our option tips. And joining us, as always, is Dan Carrel, defensive coordinator of the USFL Michigan Panthers. Dan, great to have you back again this week for what was an exciting weekend of football to review.
Great to be back, Keith. Man, I've not got a lot of opportunities in my life to sit around and watch an opening week of college football, but if they've all been like that, man, I understand what the fans see and why it's such a big sport, because that was amazing. A really exciting weekend. It's
something, Dan, as I've stepped away a little bit and got into this mode where I was looking at games like this, I mean, you see it every week, and the fun part is putting the coaching lens on this rather than the fan lens. You can take a lot away from this and learn from these games, and certainly that's what we're presenting here today.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you sit around and watch as many as you can and take notes and look at different things. Of course, my week started on Thursday night with the Backyard Brawl. As somebody who grew up in Northern Panhandle, West Virginia, that was an unbelievable game, and it was awesome to watch, to see that it's back, and just a lot of great games over the weekend.
What we've focused on here the last week really is a big tip, and then we highlighted some teams, and of course we gave our option tips. So we're going to start this week with a focus on pass rush lanes, and that was kind of the theme of the week for you. Something that you saw often was teams having bad pass rush lanes, and that's something that was hurting the defense.
Yeah, I think just watching through the game, see a lot of different breakdowns in pass rush lanes, whether there's nobody to set the width of the pocket or whether they get a four-man rush gets out of balance 3-1. But, I think that it's very important to look at that. In college football, you don't really play any immobile quarterbacks. There's just all these guys are athletes. And you look at some of them and you think maybe he's a pocket passer or maybe he's this. If you give them a crease to step up and get 6 yards on 3rd and 5, they will get it. And I think you see that just across college football. And, I think also as the sim pressure and creeper world is evolving still, that's where you end up losing a lot of pass rush lanes because, you've got guys working from 3 technique through the B gap to try to contain, or 4 eyes that got to loop out, sometimes maybe versus a 3-man surface and max pro to loop out to set the edge of the pocket. So going through all these problems and experiencing these things, throughout life, I kind of tried to build a system. One that works for us, not necessarily the perfect system or a system that is maybe better than anything else, but I felt like from a communication standpoint, from an adjustment standpoint, we had to build a rush lane system.
The way you related it to me really highlights the importance of this and why you do something like this. And I'm a big believer in systems, right? Every big defensive system is made up of many systems. The same goes for offense. The same goes for special teams. And it's really about the information you want your players to have so they do things the right way. And you equated it to, the secondary, that we don't have a freestyle of play in the secondary, that those guys just don't get to go out and do everything they want, that there are very specific things, that this is exactly what we expect, and here's our ways of getting it done. And that's essentially how you've looked at it and built a system around it.
Yeah, I mean, the first time I had to coach the outside linebackers and the edge rushers, I felt that there was a little bit more freestyle in pass rush than anywhere else. And, I know D-line coaches work extremely hard and diligent on pass rush technique and pass rush moves. And those guys have built out, systems for each individual player on, their best move, their best counter, those things. And that is such a level of detailed work that those guys put in. But sometimes it's like they get all that. It'd be like teaching a DB all these great techniques, but sometimes they got there and they don't know who to cover. Well, it's kind of moot that point that they have all this great technique if they can't know who to cover. So, what we got into, and I kind of sat back, took a look at it and said, there's really 7 possible rush lanes. Now, obviously, you don't bring 7 guys very often, if ever, right? But there's 7 different lanes, right? There's a zero rush, which is pretty obvious to everybody. This is how we term it, right? Obviously, it just works for us. There's leverage rushers, which is the 2 edge guys. Okay. There's a B rush on each side and an A rush on each side, potentially. Obviously, most of the time, you're only using 3 or 4 of these lanes, but they all kind of work together, and we'll kind of talk through them a little bit. So, yeah, you're always going to have a leverage rush, okay, on each side. You're always going to have somebody that's supposed to leverage the pocket, and that's so we say that the leverage rushers set the width of the pocket. If I came up one time and decided that we needed to drop 9 into coverage, I would have 2 leverage rushers, and that would be it. Now, I've never done that and probably won't, but if we did, we would always keep leverage rushers because the leverage rushers are going to set the width of the pocket. The only way you can do that is you get to the depth of the quarterback. So as a leverage rusher, your job is to set the width of the pocket. Okay. And again, this doesn't necessarily speak to the technique of pass rush, just where I expect these guys to end up and be on the drop back pass. So leverage rushers set the width of the pocket. Your depth is the depth of the quarterback. Max depth is 1 yard past the quarterback. And once you hit 1 yard past the quarterback, you are mandatory vertical retrace. And we teach a vertical retrace, meaning you're going to put your foot in the ground and you're going to retrace your steps exactly vertical and not – sometimes I see guys retrace kind of toward the quarterback, and what they do is they end up in front of him, and then he's able to back up and escape out. So now they've not leveraged the pocket, right? They've not set the width of the pocket. So, mandatory vertical retrace. So leverage rusher, depth is the quarterback. Max depth is 1 yard past the quarterback. As soon as you hit that, you got a mandatory vertical retrace. Those are your leverage rushers, and they can be anybody, right? They could be a defensive end, they could be a blitzing linebacker, they could be a blitzing safety. The point is everybody's got to know and understand these, right? And then everybody in each call will know, which rush lanes we're occupying on this call. So those are your leverage rushers. Then a B rusher, we have two B rushers, a B charge and a B counter. So maybe if we were like in bear. You would be a B charge. You don't counter in bear. Now, we could, but in base install, we don't, right? There's always these caveats, and then it comes down to, like, who are the guys you have. And, do you want this guy? You got a great 3-tech rush or whatever, but, like a B charge, right? You are a 3-technique rusher, a B-gap rusher, no matter what. Right? Maybe a blitzing linebacker, right? If you're just going to plug both A and B gap with the linebackers, like a bullets rush, that backer is a B charge rush. You're not countering out of the B gap, win the B gap, go. Now, my landmark as a 3 rush is the upfield shoulder of the quarterback, right? I want to be on quarterback's upfield shoulder, and it's the same thing. If I get any part past the quarterback, I'm a mandatory vertical retrace. Now, a B counter, if we said, hey, you got a B counter on this, okay, now that's when I let the 3 technique go. He's a B to A rusher. He has the A gap to win it, right? If we're in just base 4 down defense, over defense, and we got a good 3 technique rusher, he's a B counter. He'll be able to fall back into the A gap. Now, A rush, you have an A charge and an A cover. Okay, so we have an A charge where the nose, the 2-eye, however we're going to do it for the week, he stays in the A gap. That's A charge. You're in the A gap. Maybe that's a blitzing backer. Maybe it's the nose, whatever. A cover is if we're going to give the leverage, the perceived leverage rusher on that side to an open B gap, if we give him a 2-way go, then that nose would cover. So he's got to be conscious of where that guy is, and if he's going to use the B gap, then the nose becomes the leverage rusher, right? And then he has to fit all the same rules of leverage rush. He's got to get to the depth of the quarterback, max depth 1 yard pass, mandatory vertical retrace. And then, there's some variations you can get off that. We have like a B counter cross, which allows the 3 technique to counter in the A and then go all the way across, and then the nose would cover him. So there's a couple of different variations. But the biggest thing that I think for this, and then obviously, there's a zero rush. He pushes the pocket. He's going to bury the center right back into the quarterback's lap, and then he's going to if it's a true zero rush, he's going to play quarterback escape in both A gaps. But the big thing for us was just the ability to communicate it on the field, to know the expectations for each player of, hey, where do you end up on the quarterback? What is your rush lane here? And how do we change this communication on the field? Because, you might get into the game and, okay, they always slide the protection away from the back. That's what we practiced all week. They're always going to go away from the back, right? And they turn center away from the back. no matter what. We're going to be in 4-down defense. We want to play an A charge on the backside because we want the end to stay as a leverage rush. We're going to set the 3 technique to the back, and he's going to be a B counter rush. So he's got A to B. He knows it's him versus the guard. Maybe the back will chip him, but if there's no pressure, the back will probably get out. So it's him versus the guard. Center's going to turn the other way. All right, that's what we want. Now all of a sudden you get in the game, and the center turned to him. Right, he countered in there. Center put his helmet under his chin, and straightened him up a bit. And it was like, okay, so now we're going to set the 3 to the back, and then we're going to be able to say, hey, we're going to go A cover on the backside, and then you're a B charge on the front side. So now we're going to give the rush the 2-way go because we feel like that they're going to turn the protection toward the 3 technique. So we're going to give the end the 2-way go and then make the nose be the cover. And you can handle all that in the game when you have a system.
Right.
When you have words and you have a system and everybody knows it, and you can handle all that. And I think that it's been important at times, especially if we're in like a blitz situation, or maybe we're bringing 2 off the edge and we're making the 3 technique come out to be the leverage rusher. Well, it's been taught since day one, the landmarks and the depth for the leverage rusher. And I think that's what you see as much as anything, is just that when you're using interior guys to loop out off of pressure or off of movement to become the leverage rusher, that the pocket they don't end up setting the width of the pocket.
Mm-hmm.
Either they don't get deep enough, or sometimes we tell those guys, hey, if the tackle kicks wide, you can counter in, which in theory sounds good, but so many times you do that and the tackle just pins you down and the quarterback just runs out. So I think it's so important to build a system like that. I think that having a system that you can coach, and again, the linebackers, the safeties, they need to know this too. And they need to know that when you blitz, you're going to end up in one of these positions. And then you have a certain spot on the quarterback that you need to finish on, and a certain depth that you can hit. Because the other issue is that just when you let guys go, that the depth of running past the quarterback and just wasting yourself, like that's something that you have to get out of players, because, especially the leverage guys, they will do that in a heartbeat. They'll be 6 yards behind the quarterback and think they were going to win with speed and just, weren't able to do that. So building a system out, teaching it to everybody. And we did a lot of work just on cones, just calling our blitzes, calling our pressures, calling regular rushes, and just ending up on a quarterback. And so I think if you build that out, you generally get pretty good results. And I know it improved our ability to do that because, again, you work so much rush technique,
right?
So much. And those guys work so hard. The D-line coaches work so hard at those things. But sometimes you look up and it's like the rush technique didn't matter, because as soon as the ball was snapped, we opened the B gap up 6 feet and the guy quarterback just ran through it. I think those things are, obviously systems and teaching, and how we teach it, how we communicate it on the field becomes so important.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you look at the other side of the ball, they're teaching that quarterback to look for his escape route. Sometimes they're planning that escape route based on the protection, or sometimes looking at how you rush as well. And, hey, we know here's where we're going to be able to escape this week. So your system of pass rush lanes does allow you to communicate it on the field. I want to take a step back real quick. You mentioned that you do drill this on cones, but this kind of goes back to camp. How do you install this? Is this something you cover in a meeting with the individual players? Are you working together with them as a group to help them understand it? What's the way that you found to best install a pass rush lane system?
There's a few things I think within a defense that you should cover as a group. Takeaway system, if you got a system of how you strip the ball, that type of thing, I think that's a group coverage thing. Tackling, I believe, is something you cover as a group. This is something I believe you cover as a group, because in the college game, the only person that's not involved in this is the field corner. All right, we're going to blitz the boundary corner. We're going to blitz every safety at some point or another. Everybody except the field corner is involved in this. And if you're not flipping corners, then it's every corner, because that field corner could be the boundary corner on the next snap. So, yeah, I believe that you should first install this early and do it as a group, but just make sure as coaches, every single defense, you're asking the guys, what's your rush lane here? I'm a B counter. What's your rush lane here? I'm a B charge. Okay, right? So I'm an A counter. I'm an A cover. So I think that you have to constantly be just beating it into them, especially if you're a multiple system. If you play 4 down and you got a couple little games and twists, it's probably not that difficult. But if you're a creeper team or a sim team and a fire zone team, that's when there becomes a lot of understanding and learning to this. And I talk about all the different fire zones that we've had, and you become just teaching those backers based on where they're sliding changes what rush lane you become. So that's something that that takes a lot of time and practice and effort. But I think you started in the meeting. I think the whole team, the whole defense needs to understand that we have this system in place, and that everybody is expected to know and understand it. And this is the communication, this is the language, this is the verbiage. And then, as you break into position meetings and, and if you get into group meetings like back end, front end stuff, just got to continue to emphasize it. And then from a drill perspective, I think it's something you can do, in the summer or whatever, whenever you got time. But, we're out there with cans and then a pocket made of 7 dots. We don't, not actually cones. We use like the rubber dots shaped into a pocket on the other side of the cans. And we'll call a pressure, or we'll call just a regular call. And, the backers will be there, and, maybe the safeties aren't there or whatever, but, we'll get them closer to camp. But the backers are there, the D-line's there, and we hit those landmarks, right? And there's a quarterback back there, and we hit those landmarks, and the quarterback moves, and the pocket moves with them, and just teaches us where we finish on this, and stick a back in there and kind of where it goes. But, I think drilling it, I think it's something that is easy to drill in the summer. And, we added some varieties to it where with the leverage guys and just coaching those guys, I had an actual manager or other player hold a bag and then, kick and get them a yard deeper than the quarterback and teach the vertical retrace. There's a lot of things you can do with it. Sure. It doesn't have to be high impact. And I think it's one of those things you can drill a lot in T-shirt and shorts, and it doesn't need a football. So whatever you're doing, those times that the powers that be say we can't use the little leather thing, then you got a chance to get some work done with this.
Definitely. Well, you look at the season too, and you certainly want to save on bodies and the number of hits your players are taking in practice. So to be able to do that, especially if you found a week where, hey, we need to get better at this. And like you said, it's not always technique that gets you in trouble. It's just not following through on what your responsibilities are. So having something like this certainly can organize that. The next thing I wondered is how you go about and organize your thought process on game planning to look at the different ways that you're going to get into these lanes each week.
Yeah, that's a great question. The biggest thing I think that we all do in pass rush is try to find the best matchups, especially, if you're going to overload pressure and you have a built out pressure package, you're really looking to try to just get it to the man side, right? I mean, that's the man side of protection. That's kind of what we're all doing. Give us indicators to what the man side is to getting those pressures. But the 4 down, I think it's an art form and a skill in coaching as a coordinator, as a D-line coach, anybody that's coaching the front, to get your front set and get your matchup set with a 4-man rush, and how can we create pressure with 4? What games, what protection areas can we beat? Where can we really attack them with 4 guys? That to me is like the real art of being able to get a rush, because I think that all of us can draw up really nice pressures, especially overloads. I got a lot of those. Most guys do, and whether you're playing man behind them or maybe dropping a guy out and trying to get to a fire zone, but still trying to bring 4 to a side. I think those are important. A big part of what people do on 3rd down, but the ability to say, all right, I want to be able to play a beat counter because I know that our 3 technique can beat this guard, and I can know that where I can put him to make sure he's alone on him and the center's not going to help him. If I can figure that out and the 3 can beat the guard, that's really good for us. That's a win for us because we can get pressure with 4. If I can figure out that we can always get the protection turned to the 3, and I can let my rush end, my 5 technique to the open B gap, have a 2-way go, and he can press a tackle vertical and spin inside and go crazy on it, and the nose can definitely become the leverage rush. Those are the things that I'm looking for. And from a game plan perspective, and kind of like I alluded to earlier, and if it changes throughout the game, we now have a system to make those adjustments. And I think that's a part of game planning that is important to understand too. If we go in with this thought that they're always going to turn the protection away from the 3, they're always going to turn the protection away from the 3, they're always going to do that, we should already have if that's a big part of our game plan, we should already have the plan if they don't do that, right? I don't want to make that up on the sideline. I don't want to be in the middle, after the players come off the field and say, all right, they're not doing what we thought they would do, so what should we do? Right? To me, that's bad. That's not anticipation. That's bad coaching. So if we're going to build out a big part of our game plan, maybe it's third down or maybe second and medium, second and long, based on this is how they do their protections, then we better build out, okay, what if they don't? Right? At least have a thought, right? Somewhere on your call sheet notes, if third down protection is different, go to this. So, I think those are important things in game planning and having the system to communicate it as things go awry, as they tend to do in football.
Yes, they do. And I think, in any phase, as I said before, having that system allows you to be very organized in your teaching, in your install, in the way that you game plan, and then certainly how that extends to a practice plan and then the adjustments, right? A good system is going to take you through the steps of doing all of that. It's for the players for sure. You want them to think a certain way, but I've found I learned this game and I started to implement more and more of those systems. It really cleared up the thought process for me as the coach, and it gave me definitely a process for here's how we need to think about it and get to the answers, because as you said, these things are going to go awry. We'll take a look then at disguise, third down especially, and we saw a great performance out of the Ohio State defense. They held Notre Dame to 253 total yards, 76 on the ground, and I think a big factor in this game, they were 77% successful on third down stops, limiting Notre Dame to 3 of 13 conversions. So an excellent job there by the new defensive coordinator, Jim Knowles, and I know you liked what you saw in some of the disguises they were using.
Yeah, from the off-season, just the things that have come out of there. Obviously, Ohio State grew up in Ohio, got a chance to coach there. This was a very hyped defensive overhaul for those guys this offseason, and I was really excited to kind of see what they had. I will say a couple times, in their fire zone stuff, the touchdown Notre Dame scored particularly, I thought that maybe the disguise got them a little bit. I thought, this is not third down. We'll get into third down in a second. What was interesting to me, this happens sometimes, you build these fire zone rotations maybe off 2x2, 3x1 distribution, which is great. A lot of people do that. I've been a part of doing that. But when they put 3 into the boundary, they were in like a tight end wing set with the back offset there. And Ohio State rotated strong or to the field, making that field rotation guy almost in like a buzz position. He was the 3-dropper in the fire zone. And he ends up trying to get to the guy late that ends up scoring the touchdown. But, the quarterback recognized that he was coming down. The guy squirms the post late, which is good. He should have looked more like a 2-shell. But I think that he recognized the field safety was down a little bit more and wasn't, like we talked about last week, he didn't have enough width out over 2 to be there. And they were bringing both backers, so he was dropping in as the 3-dropper. And he just got there late to that seam ball. It hit him. And, just such you talk about a game of inches. If they would have rotated the other way maybe, or if he would have just kind of came down behind the backers, he would have gave it away for sure if he walked in behind the linebackers, but he might have been able to cover the guy. So, just some of those things with disguise and just how late and where you put guys to confuse the quarterback, you can get yourself in trouble at times with it. I thought that was just an interesting play. You could watch that play 5 or 6 times and really get some good information off of it. In college football especially, any 3 into the boundary, whether it's the back, any type of reduced split with the back offset that way into the boundary, something is typically up. It's not usually a base normal play. I mean, you get a lot of snag 7, but that was like the double out, the wheel with the tight end out and then the other one up the seam. Right, try to clear out, and then fire one up the seam. And it was a great play by Notre Dame. I thought they did a great job with it. The quarterback was patient, saw the rotation, and then held it. And probably, I think he held it to make sure he had what he had, but he might have held it longer than he needed to, because the guy did almost, the 3-dropper that rotated to the field almost did catch up to it. So I thought that was just, from a disguise standpoint, just the things that can go wrong or, how you rotate, and just there's a lot of nuances in that play that you could look at and learn a lot from. So I thought that was interesting.
Well, you didn't see Ohio State do that again, and certainly they had a successful finish to that game. A big part of that, as I said, was the success that they had on third down, holding Notre Dame to 3 of 13 conversions. And I know you liked what you saw on third down from them, and certainly it's something to learn from.
Yeah, I mean, I thought they gave a bunch of different looks on third down. It was interesting just in a first game when, I know that people watch what Knowles probably did at Oklahoma State, and everybody has tape of everybody, but what are you going to do with Ohio State's defense? What are you going to do with their players? So only so much can get repped if you're Notre Dame's offense, and I thought he did a great job. Knowles did a great job of mixing it up, showing different looks, showing different things, and maybe not even taking a lot of risks, but showing things that made him hesitant a little bit. I liked early on, you saw him get into what I call like split threes, and they double mug the backers and the A-gaps. And both times they did it, they buzzed them out to what looked like a weak buzz. The boundary side backer, he would buzz past the safety. Safety was kind of sitting flat foot. So, I think it was like a weak buzz on the first one they did this, the ball went to like the number 2 receiver, and safety's tackle is like 3rd and 8, tackled it for maybe +5, and they got off the field. And, that was the second time. The first time they did it was in the high red. And the second time they did it was kind of Notre Dame was a little bit backed up. But I thought it was a great look because what they did is they set it up to come back to it, and they played a little different coverage when they came back to it, which I thought was really good. And then you got a lot of man on third and medium. Thought they did a pretty good job playing man coverage. They brought some 6-man pressures. They really got after him on the one. Was interesting. They brought the 6-man pressure and really smoked the quarterback on one. But Notre Dame had a bunch. Ohio State was in some type of a bunch defense in man coverage, but they really had 2 guys inside the bunch. If Notre Dame would have ran some double outbreak, they ran like a double in-break. They ran like a dig with a follow, drive with a follow. But if they would have ran like a double outbreak, I don't think Ohio State would have been able to catch up to it because they had 2 of the 3 guys that were covering the bunch were inside the bunch. It didn't seem like they were in great spacing because, again, they were disguising for the blitz. The one guy blitzed right off the top of the bunch where you thought maybe he was going to point it and they were going to zone off, 1 and 3 like a lot of people do. It was interesting. They blitzed really hard and really fast, and when you have great players, I think that was the theme of it for Ohio State. For a lot of it was just like we're gonna use these backers that can really run and blitz these safeties, and we're gonna get pressure on this guy. And I think that was not just third down, but the whole game. And I think they did a great job doing that and using their players. But that was a little bit risky based on that bunch formation to see them do that. But they sacked the quarterback, or they either sacked him or hit him and made him cause a bad throw.
Yeah, it's one of those situations you want to make sure you get those home if you're going to do them. I know you saw a lot in terms of Sims. I do want to talk to you specifically about some game planning things, but some of the things you observed here with what Ohio State was doing with some mugs.
Yeah, so they came back to like a double mug where they ran crossfire with the inside linebackers, and kind of like we were talking about in the rush lane issue, is the 3 techniques for penetrating and trying to get to contain, and they dropped both ends out as kind of low hole players. They were in man, and they dropped those guys out as low hole players. Quarterback broke the pocket immediately. It was kind of one of those things we were talking about. As soon as he saw those ends drop out, bam, he fired out, and he broke the pocket, and he was able to push the ball downfield a little bit. But it just goes back to having how do we get to edges, how do we get to a leverage rusher? And if we're going to do it with a 3 technique, what you see a lot, and what I think Ohio State did not do in that particular play, was if you're going to do it with the 3 technique and you're going to try to do it through the B gap, the ends have got to stay home enough to get the tackle to kick, and that way it creates space for that guy to go through the B gap and be able to convert to a leverage rush where either that or that 3's got to loop so wide that you create a massive B gap. So I think that was something Ohio State will probably work on this week if they're going to come back to that. And it was something that you see a lot in that call. I've ran that call before. We called it Missouri. It's a 4-man with the double inside pressure and then both ends dropping out. So, I think that's something that, as you run that call, getting those ends to step up if you're going to contain through the B gap is really important.
Coach, from a game planning perspective, on the offensive side of the ball, a lot of people use the Bill Walsh system of game planning, which really starts with understanding how many of these situations are we typically going to see statistically over the course of a game. And then you're going to account for some overage. We're going to plan a little bit more maybe than what we're going to see to give us some answers and options. And I always think the sweet spot is whatever your players can handle. But for you, how do you go about organizing your thoughts and putting together that package that you're going to take into a game that is going to be able to be something your players are able to execute and play fast?
That's a great question. It is kind of the crux of building the menu out through the week. What are we executing well that week? What is something that, if we don't need it, if I don't feel like we need it, then I don't want to carry it. I don't want to spend time on it. So it just comes down to, throughout the week, are we practicing enough to where we can eliminate a couple things that aren't going well and really have enough for the situations? And I think what you said from a statistical standpoint, like how many third and longs are we going to be in? Like, when are we going to get a sub package on the field to rush and blitz? And I do think there are statistics over time that matter to that. I also think there are statistics relative to you as a coach that matters to that. So, I would look at all those things to kind of decide what do we need. And, if you look back at Ohio State, they gave about really, I think they did 3 things out of their double mug look. They gave us the weak buzz, but flew the backers out and played a weak buzz twice. They gave the double mug crossfire drop in the ends. And then they went to, they did something really nice at the end. It's like they were in the double mug and they got the backers out, but they showed like they were going to go to a buzz, like a one high, because the safety was, he even opened his hips to the middle of the field. The other safety was down. And then they kind of both got out, and it looked like they played quarters. They played like a mini concept to the 3-by, and then on the backside, it looked like he just kind of played a dead quarter where he just, slow pedal back. And it was on, that was a third and long. So I like the packaging of, all right, we're going to line up in this double mug, and here's the 3 calls we got out of it. And the one time they ran it, I guess as I'm thinking through this, it makes a lot of sense now. Well, the first time they got in it, they ran like a double, what I would call a double text game, where the 3 techniques penetrated and both ends under in the A gap, and that was against draw. So it was I don't know if they had a beat on, a tendency there or not. And if they did, that's a great tendency to have had, coming into a first game. I know that the coordinator from Notre Dame is back, but still, it's a new regime, it's new people, and if you can really have a beat on if somebody's going to run draw on you right there, that's really good, in my opinion. That's great scouting. But they were able to get that game in and play weak buzz. Then they ran it without that game and played weak buzz. Then they ran double crossfire, dropped both ends, played man, and had 2 low hole cutters. That's the one where they lost the edge. And then they were able to do that and play a version of quarters. So to me, building those little packages, like, all right, we're going to line up in this double mug front, and we got these 4 or 5 things we're going to do throughout the game. And then, to me, also to get them in. Now, maybe they had a couple they didn't get in, so maybe they did. I feel like you probably 3 to 4 is about as many as you're going to build out in one picture like that. And over the course of a game, to get them all in and to trust that you're going to be able to execute them, I thought was really good. I thought that was probably difficult for Notre Dame, for the quarterback, just not knowing what he's going to get, especially when he's been hit a few times, thinking, this is probably going to be zero blitz. That was the one where they end up buzzing out to play quarters. It kind of gave you an illusion that it was either going to be man or zero. So, great job disguising those things in that picture.
Moving on to our option tips of the week. I know you were really excited about the performance of Delaware against Navy.
Man, I was. I loved watching that game. It was one of those things. A couple things that I would have tweaked if I were them, but really, really great effort by the players. They played really hard. One thing I talked about last week when we talked about it is, you got to get the 3rd down stops, you got to get the 4th down stops, but you got to get the loose balls too. They put the ball on the ground 4 times, and Delaware was able to get 3 of them. And that's just playing with effort against Navy. Because the one thing that I know is that all 11 of those guys when you play the academies are going to play extremely hard. So how do we play as hard as them? How do we get the loose balls? How do we fight them for those things? Like that, that's a straight effort play. And that was really impressive by them and, their players. The other thing that was impressive, Navy was 0 for 3 on 4th down. 0 for 3. Well, you can do that right there, you have 3 4th down turnovers. They had a couple punts, but you had 3 4th down turnovers, which those are takeaways. Right? When you stop someone on 4th down, I know that the statisticians don't like to give us on defense takeaways for that. And obviously, you offensive coaches definitely don't want those to go in your takeaway turnover margin, but they are takeaways. They did not end in a kick. And then you get 3 fumbles. That's really 6 takeaways, and that's a recipe to win the game. But just really quickly, they played as a base. They were an odd team, played 4 eyes. They had some deals where they shifted guys from a 4 to a 3. But generally they were odd, and they stacked the backers. They were too high, and they stacked the backers. I really think maybe didn't stack the backers as much as they had a third safety in there, but it was that stacked backer picture that kind of became popular. I would like to say I was a part of it becoming popular. Not that I was running the defense or anything like that at the time, but at University of Houston 2015, that's what we ran against Keenan Reynolds. We played bear and played a stacked backer system, and we were able to get that extra backer to the alley, pretty often, and it kind of became a little more popular. And I know Georgia Tech and Clemson had done it some, and we did a little bit when I was at the University of New Mexico, but they did that as a base, and then they changed up, and then they played a little bit of walked the outside guys, took their edge guys in the 3-4 and widened them out, then walked their two inside backers up, and then had their safety as kind of a one backer box. But the point was they played two different forces. So when I talk about force in the option game, you're talking about essentially who has the pitch player. And so when they were in their stacked backer picture, their regular 3-4 picture, it was sky force, right? That onside safety, when action's coming at him, that onside safety is the guy pulling the pin, and he's got that. Backside safety's coming over. That high backer, that middle field guy, he's running the alley. End's got the quarterback. Mike's matching the pass to fullback, that type of thing. So that was good. And then when they got in the other picture, it was a backer force, right? They were taking the pitch from the line of scrimmage. It was that end that those outside backer guys walked up and widened out. They were taking the pitch. So the thing I love about that is you really need to be able to play two different forces, and you have to play it frequently. I think sometimes you go into those games and you have a backer force or a way to take the pitch from the line, and you don't call it enough. I'll watch games, where somebody does that maybe 3 or 4 times, where I thought Delaware did it a lot. The only criticism I would have was it looked different. So I think they knew they were getting that type of backer force immediately once the picture changed. So, it obviously worked for them, just not something that, if I had any criticism, that's probably about all the criticism I could have for them. The other thing was, I thought it was so funny. They were getting some fullback dive, which, it's not veer blocking front side. It's kind of like a zone dive is what the academies have gone to. And they were making some money with it because the backside backer couldn't get over there to get the fullback down. They were getting some push. And I was sitting there watching them thinking, man, they need to play the nose front side once or twice to get the ball to cut back to the backer. Try to make it easier on the backer, either that or just blitz them. And the next play, man, the nose went front side, the ball cut back, and the backer hit it, and it was 2nd and 9. So I thought, whoever was calling it, whatever adjustments they were making, we were definitely on the same page. So that was a funny little thing that I thought of there. And then the other thing that it got them a little bit, and the Navy actually didn't block it the way a lot of these people block it. When they flex a slot out and they get into slot formation, and you have an overhang, like an apex overhang, they are typically going to double crack you and make their corner play the pitch. Navy didn't do that. They blocked the safety in the corner, and they let the overhang play. But what happened on the first time they did it, the overhang stepped in and took the quarterback, and they got the ball in the perimeter, and the ball circled the defense. Probably the one time the ball really circled the defense the whole time. And the next time they came back in that formation, they sent the overhang to the pitch. Okay? So what I've always felt, anytime you're playing an option team, when they flex the slot out, you want to be taking the pitch from the line of scrimmage because it avoids that double crack world and putting the pitch player, making the pitch player the corner who's got so much time and space to miss. Mm-hmm. It's such a hard job for that corner to come off of a double crack and play the pitch when the whole game he hasn't been doing that. And then it forces you also to play the corner so far off to, because if you're playing them tight, they don't even realize it's a crack until the ball's on their back. So you got to play them so far off to have vision on all these things. And it just, it's tough. So I'm a fan of keeping the apex players as tight as possible and then going to be able to check to whatever your backer force is to where that you are somebody close to the line of scrimmage and not far off is got the pitch when they give you a slot. So, they end up doing that on the second time. And it, just like everything, the first time it circled the defense. The next time they came back to that play, the apex player ran right to the pitch right now. Quarterback ducked it in there, and they got 2 or 3. So that was a great adjustment by them too. But I do think anytime that they flex a slot out there, it's always valuable to look at taking the pitch from the line. And just the 4th downs I thought were great. I really did. I thought they did a great job on all the 4th downs, played them tough. That last drive, they played the nose front side, stopped they drove down. I don't know if in the end of the game, Navy was able to drive the ball down and get in the high red, and then they were able to fourth down stop. Delaware did. I'll tell you this, too. This was a great thing that came up. They saw Navy ran the throwback screen in the high red. That is a staple from an area of the field. And for all those guys, if you get into that high red on third down, expect that throwback screen where, they fake something going one way, the quarterback kind of short rolls, and then the slot stayed back, or maybe the tight end, if they went to like some of their tight end looks, he stayed back, and they run that throwback screen. And Delaware was actually short down, made a heck of a play to get it down and not get busted on it. But I know that one all too well. I've been busted on it more than once. So always in the high red playing the option team, get them third down, expect a throwback screen. But, yeah, great job by Delaware. Played multiple forces, played the nose front side when they had to, and then made adjustments on the slot to take the pitch from the line. I thought those were three great things that they did, and played harder and took the ball away 3 times and stopped them on fourth down 3 times. So 6 total takeaways.
Some great tips today, insight into the game. I know I took a bunch of notes here, so certainly a lot to dig into, but I think some very useful stuff. And I know we've got another great week, some big games. We'll be watching a lot of ball and sharing those insights with you again next week. Dan, again, thanks for taking the time, and I look forward to our discussions in the future.
Absolutely, Keith. Can't wait.